Xiaoyan was the bodyguard I picked up. He protected me for 10 years, but on the day the kingdom fell, he handed me over to the Empress Dowager for my elder sister's sake. Later, when I failed to escape and hid in a village, he threatened me with fire. Unexpectedly, the fire spread, and I was consumed by it. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day I first met him. I immediately covered my eyes and pretended to be blind as I passed by. But I heard about the mass graveyard that followed that day. A young man in black, covered in blood, searched through every passerby. When Xiaoyan found me, I was hiding in a ruined temple in Yunling village. The scorching wind swept through the air, and red flames, like a giant dragon, engulfed the entire village. I tugged at my collar, struggling to breathe in the oppressive heat. Outside, cries filled the air, and the people in the village were in panic. Only Xiaoyan, leading the imperial guards, stood motionless, a black mass of soldiers. He rode in front of the army, his dark cloak fluttering. Apparently losing patience, he ordered someone to add more fire, and then, with his gaze darkening, he spoke. "Swayan, aren't you coming out yet?" Swayan, he called my name. He set the village on fire to force me out and surrender. The flames grew stronger, and even breathing became a struggle. Not hearing my response, his voice rang out again. "Xiao Swayan, Princess Chongning, do you want to watch these villagers die because of you?" I coughed lightly, gasping for air, feeling a deep resentment. See, even at this moment, he was still making me choose between others and myself. What's worse, I still fell for it. What else could I do? My surname is Xiao. I'm a princess of the Xiao royal family. Just like that day when the city fell and the kingdom perished, he had traded the people of Indu to save my elder sister, offering me up without hesitation, catching me off guard. He gave me up without a second thought. Looking back, it feels almost laughable how foolish I was. Xiaoyan was the bodyguard I picked up. He gave his life to protect me for 10 years. How could I have known his true identity? He was the discarded son of an enemy country, a hidden agent for my elder sister. So, I escaped in the middle of the night from the convoy escorting me to the capital, and he chased me for miles. I fled to this remote village to hide, but still, he cornered me and set the fire to force me out. He enjoyed playing these strategic games, like a cat playing with a mouse. But this time, I didn't want to play along. So, when the flames hit the roof and crashed down, I leaned against the wall, calmly thinking that I would finally be able to sleep in peace. Before my vision dimmed, I thought I heard Xiaoyan shout, saw his figure rush into the flames. His cloak flared in a panic, and his usually cold eyes were filled with terror as he shakily called my name, Swayan. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, wanting to laugh. This scene seemed rather absurd to me, but sadly, I couldn't even succeed in laughing. So I didn't bother trying to understand. It was exactly what he wanted. What was he afraid of, looking like that? I died. But it seemed like I didn't die successfully, because when I opened my eyes again, my long-dead maid, LVE, was behind me, gently tugging at my sleeve, asking cautiously, "Princess, why aren't you moving forward?" It seemed like I had returned to the day I first met Xiaoyan. I remember I was 16, still known as the Mute Princess. It was the first time I went out with my elder sister, Xiao Shu, to enjoy the spring outing, and she deliberately abandoned me at the foot of the mass graveyard. The sky over the mass graveyard was gray, and the air reeked of decay and rot. LVE and I cried and encouraged each other, slowly making our way to the edge of the graveyard. And it was here that I found Xiaoyan. Looking at the big locust tree just a few feet away, I stopped LVE from moving forward. She looked at me in confusion and asked, "Princess, what's wrong?" I didn't answer, because I couldn't tell her that just a few steps ahead, beyond a low bush, was Xiaoyan, bloodied and heavily injured, unconscious. In my previous life, he had been hurt by someone and had escaped here, eventually collapsing beneath this very tree. It was a place LVE and I had to pass on our way out. So, when I trembled as I tried to pass by him, he suddenly grabbed my ankle, and I screamed in terror, struggling wildly for a long time. Because I struggled so violently, my hands hit his wound, causing him to groan in pain. He had no choice but to drag his weakened body up, sit up, and cover my mouth with one hand, threatening me. "Stop screaming." I immediately stopped, nodding obediently, like a chick pecking at rice. But in reality, his voice was weak, lacking any power to threaten. The only reason I stopped was that I saw his face. Even though it was covered in blood, it couldn't hide his beauty. I quieted down, and after confirming he wasn't a ghost, I raised my hand and seriously signed to him. "What is your name? How old are you? Do you have a marriage arrangement? Do you plan to be a consort?" Yes, I admit, I wasn't a proper princess. But Xiaoyan didn't answer my questions. He only remained silent for a moment before unexpectedly asking me, "Are you a mute?" I immediately scowled, feeling a little upset. It seemed quite impolite of him to ask such a thing in front of me. Looking back, his surprise probably stemmed from the fact that when my elder sister placed him as my secret agent, she never told him that I couldn't speak. It was only later, when I brought him back to the palace and made him my bodyguard, that I gave him everything: the best clothing, food, shelter. I trusted him in ways I had never trusted anyone else. And he betrayed me. So this time, looking at the acacia tree in front of me, with its yellow leaves hanging down, I didn't hesitate for a moment. I turned around and quickly walked in the opposite direction, leading Green Clothes with me, without stopping even for a second. Green Clothes followed me in confusion. "Princess, why have we suddenly changed direction?" "Princess, I think I saw someone under that tree just now." "Princess, enough." I stopped and didn't turn around. I gestured wildly at Green Clothes with my hands. Then, seeing the confused look in her eyes, I immediately raised my hand to cover both my own eyes and hers, signaling, "Green Clothes, your princess is blind." From the mass grave to the capital city of Indu, the distance was only 3 days. 3 days later, when Green Clothes and I stood at the city gates, the falling leaves and the Crimson Palace gates made me think of that autumn 10 years ago. 10 years ago, with the addition of Xiaoyan. The journey that should have taken 3 days took me a full 7. During those 7 days, I was cold and hungry. But there was not a single notice in the entire city of Indu about Princess Chongning's disappearance. Some might say, "You're a princess. Why not just go to the government office and identify yourself?" But I couldn't. I couldn't even hide properly, because this was the price I paid for becoming mute. Yet, even though I did my best to conceal my whereabouts, assassins still found me. On that rainy night filled with sword and knife flashes, I should have died. Green Clothes bought me time with her life, but I couldn't escape the flying sword. However, the cold blade didn't fall on me. It was Xiaoyan who saved me. That was the first time he protected me. When he stood before me with a sword, the wounds on his arm were still bleeding. He was already severely injured, and for the past few days, he had only been kept alive by the herbs I casually gathered. I don't know what sustained him at that moment, but he fought to the death, slashing the last assassin's throat. His body was covered in gaping wounds, his eyes numb and bloodshot, looking like a vengeful ghost from hell. Looking back, it was probably his ambition and loyalty to my sister that kept him going. But at that time, when I asked him why he risked his life to save me, he chose to avoid the question with a faint smile, muttering that he wanted to save his former self before collapsing onto me. Now it's too late for questions. I could only accept it, carrying him all the way to the capital's gate and to my father's side. My father only nodded faintly and agreed to let him become my guard.
Just like now.
The entire Xiao family, most of the royal family, gathered in the main hall. Facing me, the long-missing Princess Chongning. There was no excitement, no wave of emotion, as if my presence or absence made no difference. But this time, Xiaoyan, whom I had taken in, was no longer there. My elder sister, Xiao Shushuan, standing at the side, frowned slightly. When I next heard news of Xiaoyan, it had been more than 2 months since I returned to Indu. Just like in my past life, many things continued as usual, unchanged by time. The only difference was that Xiaoyan was no longer by my side, replaced by the unfamiliar maid, Green Clothes. Green Clothes was actually very young, just a few months younger than me. But she died early in my past life, so I had almost forgotten what she looked like. Because she was so young, she loved to tell me stories from outside the palace that she had heard from others. Two of those stories made me uneasy. One was about a strange incident that had occurred over 100 miles outside the city, causing panic among the people. After inquiring, I learned that it had happened at the mass grave north of Ning'an County. The troublemaker was a young man in black, covered in blood, looking severely injured. Someone saved him, but he didn't thank them. Instead, he dragged his injured body back to the mass grave. It seemed like he was looking for something lost, searching there for quite a while. After finding nothing, he began stopping people, asking if they had seen a mute girl. Who would care about whether a girl could speak or not in such a situation? So, the people of Ning'an County, seeing he was well-dressed but acting oddly, thought he must be mad and ignored him. A few days later, the situation began to take a strange turn. At first, when he asked people, he was still polite. But later, as time passed, he seemed to be possessed, with his eyes growing ferocious. Covered in blood, he would stop anyone he met, holding a sword. If anyone gave him an answer he hadn't heard before, the flash of cold light would be followed by a spray of blood. Although he didn't actually kill anyone, this caused quite a stir, and people quickly reported it to the authorities. But by the time the officials arrived, he had vanished without a trace. The incident was eventually forgotten. The other matter was that Jing Kingdom, which had long been encroaching on our borders, had finally found their lost abandoned son, the fourth Prince Qi Yan. Thus, in the early spring of the following year, during a peace banquet between the two nations, I met Xiao Yan again. The so-called peace marriage was simply a tactic for a defeated side to ask for peace. So, in my past life, at this time, as the defeated royal family, I sat at the far end on the left side of the hall, while Xiao Yan, as my guard, stood behind me. This time, however, I had a different guard behind me. Xiao Yan, on the other hand, had transformed into Qi Yan, the fourth prince of Jing, entering the hall slowly with the crown prince of Jing and their emissaries. In this life, I avoided meeting him. Technically, we had no connection. But as soon as he saw me, his pupils trembled slightly, as if he had found something long lost. When his gaze landed on the guard behind me, it quickly turned into a look of dissatisfaction, as though someone had taken his place.
It was so strange.
Xiao Yan and we were merely those two people from the mass grave. I hadn't allowed him to become the dark hand my sister, Xiao Shushuan, had arranged to be by my side. He didn't seem to hold a grudge or harbor any deep resentment for not completing his mission. So I lazily scanned the room, not even giving him a second glance. But throughout the banquet, it seemed like Xiao Yan's gaze never left me. He didn't seem to understand what it meant to avoid suspicion or what kind of occasion we were at. His gaze was so intense that the crown prince of Jing, standing before him, looked between us, lowered his wine cup, and teasingly asked him, "Fourth brother, since we entered, you've been staring at Princess Chongning. Could it be you have some old acquaintance with the princess?" The Jing royal family was full of handsome men, and Crown Prince Qizheng was no exception, with a beautiful face like a jade crown, lips like vermilion, his smile or lack thereof conveying a sense of languor. But he was also known to be a useless puppet, living in luxury, without any achievements. Thus, the competition for the throne in Jing Kingdom was fierce. Everyone looked down on him, yet everyone coveted his position, including Xiao Yan. In my past life, from Jing Kingdom to the Xiao family, no one cared for him. But the later outcome was even more cruel. Qizheng appeared to be easygoing, but in reality, he was a ruthless and vicious person. On that night in my past life, it was he who, after successfully securing the throne, marched into the city with his army, stepping over the blood of Jing Kingdom, smiling as he joined forces with Xiao Yan to destroy my city and my kingdom. The traitorous princess Xiao Shushuan, who had betrayed the country, did not receive the promises Jing Kingdom had made to her afterward. The first thing Qizheng did after breaking the city was to imprison her, intending to send her to the military camp to be a prostitute, forcing the Shao royal family to surrender the fish dragon seal. The fish dragon seal contained the secrets of Zhao's prosperity and glory. Whoever possessed the fish dragon seal could obtain endless treasures of the world. So, the events that followed naturally unfolded. No one knew where the fish dragon seal was. But Shao Yan knew, because he was the one I trusted most. So, he bound me, exchanged me for Shao Shushuan, and handed me, who carried the seal, over to Qi Zheng himself. This marriage alliance was originally meant to secure the position of Qi Zheng's side consort. When these words left his mouth, everyone in the hall immediately turned to look at me. The princess of the Shao family, who was not favored, and the discarded prince of Jing. This was hardly a good match. I tightened my grip on the pastry in my hand and remained silent. Shao Yan was not someone who acted so recklessly. Although he rarely showed much emotion, his ambition for revenge and the throne made it clear he was deeply involved in intrigue. Like later, when he hunted me down, patiently playing the game of cat and mouse with me. But now, Shao Yan seemed to have realized the impropriety of his actions. He stiffened and was about to explain. I stood up before him. I put on a confused expression and nervously gestured with my hands to my father and the ministers. I don't know this person. This preemptive move, whether the others understood or not, I wasn't sure. But I thought Shao Yan must have understood, because his hand, placed by his side, clenched tightly, trembling slightly, as he stared at me in disbelief. Qi Zheng, on the other hand, leisurely said, "Oh, so Princess Chongning is mute." He and Shao Yan were brothers by blood, and even their words were equally annoying. The words were careless, offering no respect to me or to the Shao family. The entire hall fell into a heavy silence. But no one expected Qi Zheng to change his tone, smiling calmly and then saying something astonishing. "Then, I will ask for Princess Chongning's hand in marriage." With a loud crash, a porcelain cup fell from Shao Yan's side and shattered. Actually, this wasn't the first time I encountered such a situation. In my past life, when Qi Zheng learned that I couldn't speak, he similarly asked for my hand in marriage on the spot. But everyone knew that this marriage alliance was for the third princess, Fengyang, not for me, the fifth princess, Chongning. Qi Zheng's action was nothing more than a gesture to humiliate the Shao royal family, standing in for Jing Kingdom. Although everyone understood and recognized it as his deliberate insult, at that time, Shao Yan had half of his face in shadow, and without the identity of a sword-wearing official, he had stood up and positioned himself between me and Qi Zheng, demanding, "Apologize to our princess." As mentioned earlier, Qi Zheng usually showed a good-natured demeanor. He didn't care much, casually raising his hands in mock surrender. "Oh, sorry, I was too abrupt with your little princess." He emphasized the word your, and with that light laugh, it was enough to irritate anyone. I calmly pulled Shao Yan's sleeve back, continuing to feign confusion. Shao Yan stiffened, returning to stand behind me. As a result, things calmed down. My father punished Shao Yan with 30 strikes of the rod for disrespect at the palace, and he was confined to the Ministry of Justice. When he returned, he had lost all color, collapsing into my arms. Before I could nurse him back to health, the palace's turbulent undercurrents forced him to once again pick up his sword, protecting me through 9 lifetimes of danger for the next 10 years. I knew Shao Yan had many scars on his body, and I knew the story behind each one. The worst one crossed his left chest and nearly pierced his heart. Just a little more, and he would have collapsed before me, never to open his eyes again. He protected me with his life, and his loyalty to me was unquestionable. So, during that snow-filled night, when we were hiding together in a cave, I held his body as it grew colder, and in his astonished gaze, I told him, in a somewhat rough voice from long silence, the secret of why I couldn't speak and the truth of my relationship with Shao Shushuan. I had treated him as a pawn on my chessboard, but I didn't expect that, years later, he would become the one to strike the fatal blow to my army. Now, I looked at Shao Yan, silently watching me from behind Qi Zheng. I remembered that in my past life, He knew I would never marry Qizheng, so he played the part to ensure I became a lost soul in the camps of his and Xiao Shushuan's faction. Back then, I didn't know what he and Xiao Shushuan were scheming, nor when Xiao Shushuan had discovered my secrets, leading her to act first.
But now I knew.
I wouldn't sit still and wait for my death. What's more frustrating to an enemy than a sleeping opponent within their stronghold? So, under everyone's gaze, I stood up again, gracefully adopting the dignified posture of a princess, and with my hands, I carefully signed, "Father, I am willing to go to Jing Kingdom for the marriage alliance to ensure the peace of both countries." After lowering my hands, I tilted my head and smiled at the crowd. Ignorant, naive. I was, after all, the rumored mute, unremarkable fifth princess. This sudden change of events brought another round of silence from everyone present. Qizheng, the other main party, after seeing my gesture, raised an eyebrow and studied me for a long time. Then a meaningful smile curled on his lips. "Good. It's settled then." Behind him, Xiao Yan's hand, resting on his sword, tensed, veins bulging, his eyes darkening with a chilling coldness. 7 days later, I was sent to Jinghua in the name of a princess for marriage. Before I left, my father, for the first time, showed some rare fatherly tenderness. His stiff hand gripped mine, his eyes cloudy and expressionless as always, and he calmly discussed the details of my journey to Jinghua. Even Princess Xiao Shushuan unexpectedly held my hand, asking after me with concern. I responded indifferently, watching the resolve in her eyes, knowing she was determined to succeed. In my heart, I silently thought to myself, she's baited the hook. Just days ago, she was in a foul mood, but now she was calm and collected. She never hid her intentions, as it was all written on her face. Why was she like this? Because she didn't care. She was the leading lady of this entire world. When did I realize this? Probably when I was 7. After Xiao Shushuan fell off her horse, she woke up a changed person. My eldest sister, Princess Xiao Shushuan, had once been the most affectionate towards me. But after her awakening, though she kept up appearances, she no longer secretly came into my room on sleepless nights to give me a piece of sweet candy. At first, I thought it was just because she was injured, feeling upset. But then, she gave me a plate of poison pastries. She had tried to kill me countless times. Unfortunately, none of her attempts succeeded. I didn't know why she failed each time, or why I managed to narrowly avoid death. But when I saw her angrily throw a piece of jade and scold the kneeling guard, saying, "I'm the heroine of this story. I want to kill the villain early and I can't? What kind of absurd rule is that?" I finally understood. Then came the day I lost my voice at 14. The next day, she looked at me, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "How can you still speak?" I froze for a second, then slumped back, and from that moment on, I voluntarily became mute. As for why I compromised and why Xiao Shushuan grew so bold, it was because I realized that every prophecy she spoke of would come true. No one could defeat her. So she had nothing to fear and no taboos. On the road from Yingdu to Jinghua, it was Qizheng who escorted me the whole way. He protected me on one hand, while on the other hand, flaunted his carefree demeanor, openly indulging in flirtations. His brazenness led those accompanying us to sympathize with me. I pretended to accept it, acting as if I had no regrets about the marriage alliance. The only exception was Xiao Yan. He always appeared seemingly indifferent, staying close to me. But I was under strict supervision, and he could only circle around me. Even when Qizheng joked at his expense, Xiao Yan would clench the reins, his face dark with displeasure. Xiao Yan looked down on Qizheng. Even in the past life, when Qizheng had succeeded in securing the throne, Xiao Yan still saw it as nothing more than the power of Qizheng's family. Even when Qizheng became ruthless, bloodlessly purging 2 nations with ironclad resolve, Xiao Yan never relinquished his ambition to seize everything he believed was rightfully his. He and Qizheng were always at odds. So he didn't know that the reason I managed to escape from the prisoner convoy was because Qizheng himself had ordered it. He also didn't know that every night, After a drunken revelry, Qizheng would return to camp, smile at me, and toss me a jug of wine, teasing, "Xiao Xuan, you're really getting addicted to pretending to be mute, huh?" After we arrived in Jinghua, I was unsurprisingly placed in the Prince Qizheng's private residence. Like when we left the camp, the place was heavily guarded, and Xiao Yan still couldn't enter. It wasn't until 10 days later, on the day of my wedding to Qizheng, that the guards were less vigilant. That night, Xiao Yan, dressed in black, burst in, sword in hand. He knocked out the guards outside, and when he rushed in, I was alone, sitting by the bed, dressed in my wedding attire, adorned in dazzling jewelry. I wasn't sure if it was him. I thought it was Qizheng. I raised my hand to gesture. Midway through, a warm hand grasped my arm. I pursed my lips and lifted the veil. It was Xiao Yan, looking at me with dark eyes. I knew then he had also been reborn. Xiao Yan held my hand but said nothing. Perhaps because he saw the confusion and unfamiliarity in my eyes, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Xuan, I've come to take you away." I continued pretending not to know him, waving my arm to express my refusal. I struggled aimlessly, just like the time years ago when I was startled by him at the graveyard. He seemed to recall that moment. From the moment he entered, his solemn face softened into a gentle smile. "Xuan, I know you don't want to recognize me right now, but Qizheng is no good. Don't worry, today I will definitely take you out." As he spoke, he grabbed my hand and tried to pull me away. But I struggled even harder, only able to make hoarse sounds, unable to speak. The reborn Xiao Yan had changed a lot. If it had been before, he wouldn't have dared to do this. But now, with a firm grip on me, he declared, "Xuan, today I must take you away." He wrapped his left arm around my waist, wielded his sword with his right, and was ready to break through.
See?
He wasn't always the calm and loyal person he had appeared to be in front of me. He still had some rebellious streak in him. So, knowing the consequences of betraying me, he still did it for Xiao Shushuan. Afterward, he hypocritically comforted me, saying, "Xuan, I won't let anything happen to you." "Won't let anything happen to me? Then I'll make sure something happens to him." Just as Xiao Yan was about to lead me out of the palace, 3 distinct claps echoed from outside the door. The sound grew louder, and in an instant, Qizheng, followed by his men, entered, a playful smile on his lips. "Fourth brother, where are you planning to take my concubine?" Xiao Yan, unfazed, pushed me behind him, his jade-like face stern, radiating a cold aura. On the day Xiao Shushuan's rebellion led to the fall of the Xiao family during the chaos in the palace, Xiao Yan had also placed me behind him. He gripped my hand tightly, his fingers turning white from the pressure. Every inch of his body, his waist, back, and arms, was covered in scars. He fought his way through, bloodied, and when he stood against Qizheng's forces, he remained unyielding to the end. But he met Xiao Shushuan. With my trembling hand in his, he asked me, "Your Highness, if I were to exchange you for the people of Indu, would you hate me?" He was really good at making excuses for himself. He wanted to exchange me for Xiao Shushuan, yet used the people of Indu to threaten me. Just like now, in a similar situation with the same group of people. Without the option of Xiao Shushuan, he still pretended to be loyal, pretended that he had never betrayed me, as if nothing had happened. But how could that be? I hold grudges. In front of me, Xiao Yan stood alone, struggling. His fists couldn't fight against 4 hands. He was at a disadvantage, his body covered in injuries. But it seemed like fate had decided this. The guards around Qizheng, who were originally surrounding him, had lost their formation. Xiao Yan seized the opportunity, charging forward, his sword sharp and heading straight for Qizheng. I lowered my head and looked at his hand still holding my wrist, and I smiled slightly. With a twist of my wrist, I pulled away forcefully. When he panicked and tried to grab me again, I ran towards Qizheng and stood in front of him, raising my hand expressionlessly. "If you want to kill him, you'll have to kill me first." Xiao Yan's sword was mere inches from me, frozen in place. He looked at me with an almost hollow expression, seemingly unable to believe that I for Qi Zheng was standing in front of his sword. But so what? When he released his grip and the sword fell, he was overwhelmed by the Imperial guards and forced to the ground. Xiao Yan hoarsely asked me, "Swain, why?"
Why?
I wanted to ask you the same thing, but it didn't matter anymore. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow flash across the southeast corner of the outer wall. Qi Zheng and I exchanged a glance. The show was finally about to begin. Xiaoyan was pressed to the ground by the Imperial guards. He looked up at me, sitting alongside Qi Zheng, and finally understood the current situation. He anxiously struggled. "Swain, you can't trust him."
Oh?
I put down the tea in my hand, raised an eyebrow, and sneered. "Then can I trust you?" I hadn't spoken for so long that my voice was still hoarse, but it was clear enough for Xiaoyan to hear. The blood drained from his face, and he forced a smile that was uglier than tears. "Swain, you're finally speaking to me." Yes, I finally spoke. The old Xiao Yan had guarded this secret with his life. The reborn Xiao Yan now expected me to break the secret. I stood up from my seat, took the sword that had been confiscated from him. This sword was called Cui Shan. I named it. I once hoped that Xiao Yan could shake the mountain and stand tall forever. And now I had this sword pressed against his neck. "Xiao Yan, when you offered me to surrender, did you ever think that there would come a day like this?" Xiao Yan froze as he looked at the sword against his neck. I don't know what he was thinking. He closed his eyes, as if he had resigned himself to his fate, ready to be at my mercy. "Swain, I give it back to you." That made me laugh.
What are you?
"You think you can say that word?" I threw the sword on the ground, looking down at him from above. "Xiao Yan, the biggest regret I have is saving you back then." Xiao Yan suddenly looked up, his composure completely lost. Those words were like the last stab to his heart, causing him to collapse with no hope left. Qi Zheng locked him in the imperial prison. The interrogation process went smoothly. Qi Zheng asked, and he answered. When asked why he chose Xiao Shushuan and offered me up, he was silent for a long time. "Because I couldn't control myself." "Couldn't control yourself?" After Qi Zheng passed the message to me, I laughed and fell back into my chair. This was the funniest joke I'd ever heard. Anyone else saying that would make sense. But for him, Xiao Yan, it was especially ironic. Because I had told him about Xiao Shushuan. I had told him that Xiao Shushuan was the ruler of this world. I told him that when it came to Xiao Shushuan, almost everyone would lose their mind and act against their own thoughts in an instant. So I told him to control himself. Don't let Xiao Shushuan deceive you. Yes, I know it sounds like an impossible task. It sounds like he has some grievance. After all, how much self-discipline does one need to break free from a set fate? Why did I make such a demand of Xiao Yan? Because others have done it. Because, except for him, everyone else has done it. My father, my royal siblings, my real elder sister Xiao Shushuan, and even Qi Zheng, who she always considered a thorn in her side. They all did it. My mother, who died 20 years ago in the regent's office after discovering the disaster's omen. My father, who placed the military seal on me with his last bit of sanity. Because of resistance, he became a puppet, speaking only numb words. Numbly doing what had been planned for him. Numbingly following his destined path. Xiao Shushuan laughed, calling him an NPC. She knew the future development of each of us. She said I was just a small NPC hindering her ascent to the throne, and that it would be best to eliminate me early. That's why I kept appearing in endless assassination attempts. Those assassins had no names, no origins, sometimes no faces at all. This was Xiao Shushuan's rule. She knew everything about us, but we knew nothing. Until on the day I went mute at 14. Because of her arrogance, I found the loophole in her rule. I lay low for over a decade. And then Xiao Yan told me I couldn't control myself. It was laughable, but I also blame my own short life. The fire that forced me to reveal myself was never meant to kill anyone. Xiao Shushuan said I would die on the way back to Jinghua, but I escaped. However, I could not escape the fate of death. So, on the 7th day after my rebirth, And the fourth day of testing Xiao Shushuan in Yidu City, I met with Qi Zheng in a tavern outside the city, because he was also reborn, but with some differences. He was in a cycle of rebirth. Qi Zheng was the male protagonist of this world. He had awakened. He was supposed to love and fight against Xiao Shushuan, but he refused to accept the fate set for him. He told me that after I died in the previous life, his male protagonist Luck never won against Xiao Shushuan. She not only killed everyone from the Xiao family, but also slaughtered the imperial capital of Jingua. In the end, she became the empress, unifying the world, proudly declaring, "I did this to help all the women in the world rise up from feudal thinking. I am the chosen great heroine. Any man who dares to defy her will end up in pieces." That was why Qi Zheng came to find me, the first person to discover Xiao Shushuan's loophole. I looked at my father, who had been repeating the same things for decades, and my royal brothers and sisters, who stood blankly within the palace walls every day. Qi Zheng and I secretly cooperated, sharing information about Xiao Shushuan's rules. Thus, the scene at the marriage banquet happened. We openly told Xiao Shushuan, "We are no longer controlled." This was to stir panic in her. So she had people follow Xiao Yan, because she knew he would come to find me. And the shadow that left that day, the message it carried, was enough to be the leverage we needed to overthrow Xiao Shushuan. On a midnight some days later, we finally waited for Xiao Shushuan. Qi Zheng said that despite the flawless rules Xiao Shushuan had created, she still had one calamity, and it was tied to her emotional entanglement with him. According to the script, Xiao Shushuan had been in love with Qi Zheng. Thus, she suffered her only emotional injury. At the lakeside of Yichuan, she was shot by a girl who admired Qi Zheng, facing near death. In truth, she couldn't die, no one could kill her. Even someone like me, whom she considered a small NPC, couldn't die until it was my turn, let alone her, the protagonist of this world. But there was one exception. That was the loophole I discovered. If, at the moment Xiao Shushuan was on the brink of death, someone else, also about to die, made a move, there was a chance to kill her. That was why I appeared here. When Xiao Shushuan saw me standing next to Qi Zheng, she wore an expression of as expected. "Xiao Suian, you really have self-awareness now." She sneered and said, "You don't think that just because you're with Qi Zheng, you can deal with me, do you? You believe me, don't you?" She pointed to Qi Zheng beside me, grinning maliciously. "Give me 3 sentences, and he'll help me kill you." She was disdainful, because things were developing exactly as she had anticipated. She simply followed the script Qi Zheng had mentioned, and Qi Zheng instantly changed his expression, drawing his sword to strike me. I was forced to flee in a panic, with Qi Zheng chasing me. Xiao Shushuan raised her eyebrows triumphantly, watching me get injured by Qi Zheng's sword, my life hanging by a thread, as she laughed breathlessly, as though watching an ant. "Xiao Suian, Xiao Suian, with you still want to fight with me? You really think I haven't noticed you pretending to be mute?" She laughed madly, and I, exhausted from dodging, had no time to respond to her mockery, until, covered in blood, seemingly fleeing from Qi Zheng, but actually evading him, I reached into my sleeve before Xiao Shushuan could react, and pulled out a dagger, thrusting it into her chest. At that moment, Qi Zheng behind me had an expression that instantly cleared, his eyes bright again. I exhaled the breath I had been holding, and smiled at Xiao Shushuan, who couldn't believe it. For the first time in years, I spoke to her. "Yes, sister. You really are very charming," I said, as I twisted the dagger, ripping her skin and causing her to scream in pain. Xiao Shushuan glared at me viciously. "You want to kill me? You'll die too." Yes, if I wanted to kill her, I'd surely die. So I had long been prepared. I closed my eyes, waiting for her counterattack. But in the next second, a familiar hand pulled me back. Then a sword swept through. When I opened my eyes, I saw Xiao Yan standing with his sword raised, piercing Xiao Shushuan's chest. And he had blocked her fatal blow for me. I stood stunned, until the wind blew, and I saw him glance back, softly calling my name. Your Highness. The young man's final awakening finally took the sword to the barrier he had never crossed. Before his eyes closed, he thought. Sueon was right. Xiao Shushuan's control over him was just a threat. It was his own instability that made him a puppet. The light that never belonged to him 10 years ago would, in the 10th year, extinguish without any lingering attachment. Compared to Xiao Yan, Xiao Shushuan's life seemed so long. Before she died, she was still screaming, "This is impossible. You can't kill me. I'm the great heroine. I did all of this to overthrow patriarchy, to prove that women can rise, that women can become empresses, standing at the top of the world." I looked at her gradually becoming insane, and calmly withdrew my gaze. Yes, you are the great heroine. But women fighting for their rights has never been about stepping on the bodies and blood of others. You strive for gender equality, but your starting point was unfair. Feminism doesn't mean killing all men to gain rights. It's not about proving that women's thoughts can rise by defeating men. In this world, there are fathers, brothers, mothers, and sisters. We can coexist in many identities, not just through love to judge the rights of gender. To truly stand in the world, it's about having a strong heart, spiritual and material richness, not waiting for a man to acknowledge you. Xiao Shushuan, you never truly loved yourself. I don't know if she heard me, and I don't care whether she understood. All I knew was that when she faded away, I saw my real sister, Xiao Shushuan. She smiled and reached out her hand to me, as if she wanted to stroke my head like she used to. I smiled back, holding back the tears that welled up in my eyes. You see, my sister, she is the woman I truly admire. 3 months later, when everything had settled, my father and my royal siblings gradually returned to normal. The Xiao family also signed a 100-year peace treaty with Jinghua, hoping for peace at the borders. One afternoon, Qi Zheng and I met at a small house in the mountains to drink. After a few rounds, leaning on the railing and gazing out, he laughed and said, "Someone asked me why I don't end up with you. They said we've been through so much together and trust each other. Why didn't we spark love?" I looked at the delicate porcelain cup in my hand, raised my glass, and toasted him. As the warm wind blew from the mountainside, I heard myself reply, "Because one failed relationship doesn't mean I need another man's rescue and redemption." The end.